Welcome back to Friday Football Fever. Doug Fernandes joins me in the studio here. Let's get right to it. Venice, Sarasota, you were at that game. Your assessment?
Well, you know, Venice played Charlotte last week, and they have Manatee next week, a big district matchup. So this is one of those games, a trip-up game, where, if Venice wasn't careful, maybe Sarasota could do some damage. At the end of the first quarter, it was 0-0. It just seemed like Venice was suffering a little bit of a hangover. But with Trey Burton in control, you're not going to suffer that hangover for very long. He had 3 touchdown passes, ran 2 in, was 14 of 18 for 205 yards. And it was just a clear example of the Sailors didn't give up, but Venice just has so many more weapons, and they surround their talent better. And that's what Bob Perkins told me after the game. We have to surround our athletes with more athletes, and that's what Venice does.
Well, now it sets up an interesting matchup for next week. Since Manatee won, Venice and Manatee will play for the 5A District 10 title next week. And another big district win was the Outdoor Academy. They whooped up on, well, not actually whooped up on, but beat Bradenton Christian 17-7. So talk about, we got some interesting battles going on here now.
We do, and I just want to give a quick shout out to Bradenton Christian because they were undefeated going into tonight. They played well even in a loss. And I got a few emails this week from people up in Bradenton Christian saying, remember us, give us some pub. So even though they lost tonight, I'd like to give a shout out to that program. It seems like that program and that fan base is well on the way to developing something strong there.
Yeah, and we can't forget about the Charlotte Tarpons. They also won big tonight over Lakewood Ranch in a shutout, 49-0. Talk about a team that bounced back after losing a close one, 31-28 nail-biter down there to Venice.
Yeah, it's clear. By this point in the season, there's only 3 weeks left. The haves and the have-nots have been separated. We just talked before the break about Booker going down. That was kind of a shocking defeat. But you can tell the 3 or 4 teams are going to represent this area going forward, and the other teams are pretty much just looking forward toward next season.
Well, let's look at another matchup here. Some other disappointments. Who else do you foresee?
Well, I mean, Sarasota, a lot was expected of Sarasota, and that's what I talked to Coach Perkins after the game, and that's what he said. When you look at a team like Venice, they not only have Trey Burton, but they have so much other talent around Trey Burton, which makes him even look better. And you look at the Sailors, they just don't have the speed or athleticism. They were one of those teams early on in the season that may come up lacking, and true to form, they have. They just don't have the athletes some of the area schools have.
Yeah, speaking of athletes, you got Trey Burton, you got Mike Bellamy. I was just talking about a play that he had against Lakewood Ranch. He's just talking about turning something into nothing. You also got Manatee, that they've got the Ace Sanders, those kind of guys, the Breon Carnes, the guys that could just turn nothing into something. And that's really, you're right. You got to have those athletes that can just take your team to the next level.
Right. Venice had 3 turnovers today, 3 fumbles. That's double than what they've had all the way up to this point. So the Sailors had their chances to sort of ease into that game, and they never really could capitalize on them.
Can you forecast a team down the road? Is it too early to still tell who may go the furthest here?
I saw Charlotte and I saw Venice. Unfortunately, they're not in the same classification. I'd love to see those 2 teams in the finals, but I think you've got to include Charlotte, you've got to include Venice. I mean, Manatee looks like they can score and be scored upon. Hats off to the Riverview Rams. I think a lot of people thought that maybe they wouldn't put up the battle that they did. John Sprague hung in there, who's been under some pressure this year. His team hung in there. So those 3 or 4 teams, those are the ones to look out for in the last 3 weeks.
All right, we shall see how the rest of it will unfold. But for right now, that's our time. He's Doug Fernandes. I'm Antawan Smith. We will be back with more news, weather, and sports coming up after the break.